This is Weekly Woman by Jubilance for PMS. Great. So thank you so much, Leslie. It's so nice to have you on the podcast. I'm really excited to get to talk to you today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm a big podcast listener, so this is exciting for me too.
Yeah. And so what's exciting to our listeners, so they know, Leslie is my trainer at the gym, and have just talked to her for like 6 months now, I think, about everything you like to read and your podcast and everything you're doing in the city. But we realized that you should be on this podcast and be talking about your like amazing transition in your life, and what women should be doing when they have cramps, when they want to exercise still. So we're excited to have you on today.
Fabulous. I'm excited too.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from Minnesota. I was born and raised there, Southwest Minnesota, so a very small town, right around 200 people. So you can imagine that New York is quite different. From the time I could really actually create like coherent thoughts, I always wanted to move out of Minnesota. Nothing against Minnesota. It's just one of those things for me. It's very easy. It's my hometown. So I always wanted to go and explore more. And what better way than to move to New York?
Amazing. And what is Minnesota known for?
Probably it's cold. I think most people hear Minnesota and they think Canada. At least that's what I get a lot around here or when I'm not in Minnesota. So I would probably say the weather is definitely the most common theme that people think of when they think of Minnesota.
Okay.
Kind of an interesting thing too that I just found out is they actually have the world's quietest room where
What?
it's so quiet you can't even sit in this room for more than like 45 minutes without having like hallucinations, because apparently it's so quiet you can hear like the blood flowing through your veins.
What? How did they have this? Did they build it on purpose?
I don't know. Because it's kind of like sound. There's also different colors. Like there's colors so dark, you almost like can't even see it. It looks like a black hole. And so this is kind of what they created with this room. I have no idea what the purpose is. I just found this out the other day, but I was like, oh, interesting.
Wow. Good to know about Minnesota.
Right. And in Minnesota too, out of all places.
Wow. That is fascinating. Yeah, I don't even know what quiet sounds like because we live here in New York.
Okay. For sure.
Yeah. And can you give me like one of your favorite childhood memories that you had there? Like, what do you just like think about always?
Yeah, I had overall a really, really great childhood. I would say probably my favorite childhood memory is we used to quite often go, we would just like say up north. We had a camper at the time where we'd go to a resort called Ball Club Lake Resort. And my family likes to fish. I was never into fishing. But as a kid, you go there and you swim. There's like a beach there, just being outside. So
Mhm.
we would do that regularly growing up. I would have to say that is probably my favorite childhood memory, or the one that I
Okay.
think of the most.
Yeah. That
Mhm.
sounds lovely and totally different from where you are now in living in New York City. Can you talk a little bit about that transition? So you grew up in Minnesota. Walk me through what happened to get you here.
Yeah, it was it was kind of a crazy one. So grew up in Minnesota. I went to college there as well. As soon as I graduated college, I actually moved to DC. After COVID, long story short, I ended up back in Minnesota, and I settled with a job in the finance industry as a financial advisor with Edward Jones, which was great. I mean, a wonderful learning opportunity, but ultimately, I knew I wanted to get back into fitness. And I knew I also geographically did not want to be in Minnesota. It was my mindset in Minnesota was just overall very limiting. Like I did not see myself prospering there at all. So last spring, about a year ago now, I was just throwing out some applications to different gyms like Equinox, Lifetime, etc., kind of expecting it to take several months before I actually was offered a position. And Equinox, pretty much the interview process went a little bit like, when can you start?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I accepted the position and hung up the phone and thought, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to call them back on Monday and tell them I can't come, because I'm not gonna pick up my life and just move to New York in 10 days.
10 days? They gave you 10 days? That's
Right.
it?
It was pretty much 10 days.
Oh my gosh.
And so I thought it over a little bit more. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just like put my apartment on Facebook, see if I can get a subleaser. And if I can't get a subleaser, then it ends there. So I
Wow.
did that, and I got people interested right away. And
Oh
so
my
from
gosh.
there, it just kind of, I found a moving company, which was a total scam. That was really the only thing that went sideways. I told my, I didn't really have a boss, but I told my administrative assistant that I was planning to move.
Mhm.
And in the finance industry, as soon as you say I'm done, you don't get 2 weeks. Like, you've sent in your letter of resignation, like
Oh,
you pack
wow.
up and leave. So I didn't do that until the pretty much the day before I moved. And I just called my mom a couple days before and was like, are you maybe around on Monday? Because I need a ride to the airport.
Wow. What did your parents say? Were they just like go off and live your dream, or were they like shocked that it was so quick?
So I think the first thing my mom said was, how are you going to tell your dad?
Oh.
And I said, well, I thought you were going to do that. And luckily she did tell him. So I didn't have to rip the band-aid off, but I did have to have a conversation with him, because I think both of my parents, which it's not a surprise, they're a little bit more conservative in the mindset of, just quitting your very secure job and moving out to
Mhm.
something that's not secure and a massive, very intimidating city that you've never really been to before. But I was very much ready, and I'm always up for the challenge as well.
Mhm.
But it was definitely, I think, a lot of white knuckling on their end of the phone. But I wasn't too worried. I was like, what is life?
Yeah. I I mean, you picked up and moved to DC, you moved back home, then you moved to New York.
Mhm.
Um, and why fitness? Can you talk a little bit about that? What propelled you to push for this specific career?
Yeah, so it started a really long time ago. In high school, I actually have to give props to my mom, because she would wake me up at like really odd hours of the morning at like 5 a.m., which then felt very early,
Oof.
to have me get up and run with her, which I thought was borderline child abuse at the time, and I really disliked it. And but it kind of built that habit. And so when I graduated high school and was on my own in college, at first I was like, well, screw this, I'm not going to do it. And then I, over time, started putting on weight and had this weird relationship with my body where I was like, I feel so much better when I'm working out. So
Mhm.
then it was kind of over time developing a new relationship with working out, something that I knew was going to be sustainable and something that I liked. At that time, it just so happened that that fitness influencer on Instagram was really beginning to make that pathway. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, so if lifting weights gives you a more feminine figure and a butt, like that's what I want. I feel like I'm a chubby rectangle right now, or at least that's how I looked at myself. So it was a lot of trial and error for myself of developing a healthy relationship with my body, working out, and food. And it was never all that easy. It was, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes going through that. And sometimes I made big steps back.
Mhm.
But over time, that kind of helped me get closer to where I am ultimately today. But through that entire process, I really began to love just the journey of health and fitness, as
Mhm.
opposed to loving what people always desire, which is kind of the idea of like this like perfect body and bikini ready and different things like that. So I began to love this journey and kind of wanted to share it with other people. And so I have several years of experience personal training prior to Equinox. But when I went back into fitness, or excuse me, when I went back into finance, I thought, this is not at all what I want to do. And I almost felt like morally I was off base because I didn't care. I didn't care in finance at all. And I was handling, people's futures and retirement. And it just wasn't there for me. So I was like, I eat, breathe, sleep, fitness, and behavior change and balance. And I need to get back into that.
Wow, that's amazing. And you just decided to dive headfirst into a new city, into a new job, new career path. And you're an entrepreneur for yourself because you're finding your own clients. Equinox like allows you the space to be there, but you're basically an entrepreneur. Can you talk a little bit about like building up your business and pushing to find new clients?
Yeah, this is the most difficult part for me because I'm certainly not an extroverted social butterfly personality. I'm way more introverted, a little bit more on the quiet side, but I do love teaching and I love the education style of what I do. So that's definitely more of a mental game for me, is putting myself out there and having to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. But you're right. I would say because of the environment that I'm in, it was much easier for me to build a business here in a gym where people are specifically here to work out. And I'm a strong believer that everybody needs a trainer. They just need the right trainer. As opposed to when I was in finance, you had the whole world at your fingertips, and it was very hard to like, how do I organize this so I can efficiently build a business? Here I'm thrown into a gym where there's people everywhere who would at least be, at least entertain the conversation of what I have to offer.
Yeah.
But it's not always easy. And, different clubs here in New York provide different opportunities as far as the ease of building your business. At a corporate club where we are, it's a little bit more difficult just because we don't get as much foot traffic. But you build really great relationships with the clients that you get. And then that also turns into referrals and just, better clients over time. So.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. And I'm curious, and for our listeners too, you said people just need to find the right trainer, that everyone needs one. And like your approach is so wonderfully holistic, like always asking, how's your sleep? How's your nutrition been? And creating something specific for each individual person. How do you come to those conclusions and create that overall holistic training for each client?
Yeah, well, the foundation of your health is really going to fall on your stress and your sleep and how you're recovering. I can give you the best program, but if you're not sleeping well at night, if you're extremely stressed out and you have no healthy way of regeneration for yourself, there's nothing that I can ultimately do for you as your trainer other than just giving you an ear to listen, and just somebody else in your corner. Now, when it comes to the actual programming, it's really, really, really simple. And typically those are the best types of programs, is taking the same quality of life movements that we do, like your squats and your deadlifts, and any pushing and pulling moves, and just adapting to those and changing those slightly over time. But for the most part, all of my clients, unless they have injuries and they can't do something, or they're specifically training for a sport, are running a very similar program, just different as far as how advanced they are.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yep.
And for a beginner who has never had a trainer and wants to get into fitness, what would you recommend to our listeners to start doing?
I would say start as slow as possible. And the reason why I say that is because so many people want to throw the entire kitchen sink at it at once. And then maybe 1 out of 10 of those people are actually consistent with that.
Huh.
Maybe
Okay.
And if that one person is consistent, they're eventually going to kind of hit a wall where they're no longer progressing. And now once you've thrown everything at it, what do you add?
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of hit that plateau, which is very unmotivating. So I like to say, and a lot of people want the quickest way to get to their end goal. Nobody wants to hear that it's a really long process to be very sustainable, because we're learning how to live in a world where food, delicious food, is so accessible. And I could put you on the coolest diet ever and watch you lose weight. But then when you start living your day-to-day life again, you haven't learned anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really about breaking down, okay, what goal can we set for this month that's sustainable, that you can stick to? And then how can we build upon that? And many people come to me and they think they're ready for that first goal, and they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just about, how can I get you consistently coming to see me just once a week?
Mm-hmm.
And then can we add a second workout? And then can we add more water? And then can we add more vegetables or protein? It's a long process for many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good reminder, because especially you're like, oh, it's like bikini season coming up in the summer, or like gotta get my like New Year's resolution in. And then that kind of tends to like plateau or fall off to the wayside. I know
Yeah.
like tomorrow, since I'm Catholic, I'm like trying to figure out, what am I giving up for Lent? And my
Mm-hmm.
goal is like giving up sugary drinks, but hopefully I'll continue. We'll see how often that happens. But I think like what you're saying of like creating something that's sustainable, that you can do over time, and that you're
Yeah.
not just gonna, like how you said, the 1 in 10 will continue,
Yeah.
um which is
And
wild.
it's crazy. I mean, anybody can, I mean, just because I get somebody to lose weight or reach their goal of getting stronger, it doesn't make me a good trainer. Anybody can do that. And people do it all the time. They lose weight, but the numbers are crazy. I mean, like 90% of people will gain it back
Mm-hmm.
at some point. It's
Yeah.
just hard. We're living in a different life. 50 years ago, our ancestors weren't working out
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't have to. They had just a more active lifestyle naturally. It's completely different nowadays. So it's really about, what small goals can I set for myself, nail that down so it's now a habit, and then how can I build upon that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Leslie. And I think, like, especially for our listeners, we're a period company. We work with PMS. A big question that we get is like, what do you do when you have cramps? Or can you exercise while you're PMSing or you're on your period? And what should they be doing?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's not one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
I know some women who feel they're strongest when they're on their period. I know others where it's just not going to happen. Yep, like we plan it out. We see when they're going to have their period next, or about that time. We don't even put those sessions on the calendar, because the
Mm.
likelihood that they will cancel is very high.
Okay.
So it is different for everybody. If you can work out, I say do it. Some women just like to go a little bit lighter.
Mm.
Another common experience that some women have is if they're able to kind of get in front of the, mostly like the cramps or the discomfort, then movement and strength training almost acts as like an ibuprofen. It does kind of help with the pain, but
Huh.
it's tough once you already have the cramps to have the motivation to be like, oh yeah, I can get up and work out.
Yeah.
You don't feel bad for taking that day off. Listen to your body.
Okay. Thank
Mhm.
you. That's very helpful. I always feel like, oh, I'm so sad. I'm like depressed, and then also oh, I feel in pain, and like I should be
Yeah.
working out, and then you feel guilty,
Mhm.
but I think that's good advice, to just listen to your body and know
Yeah,
what know what it
you have to
needs.
think. Yeah, exactly. You have to think too that all of that is just another stress on your body. And to add working out on top of that, which is just another stress, sometimes it's just not necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's a positive stress, but it's still a stress.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Leslie, something that we always ask on the podcast is, and it can change like second to second, minute to minute. What is your definition of womanhood?
My definition of womanhood, I would say, um, to me, being a woman is just being very adaptable. You think of, I mean, women are just amazing in the sense that they can play so many roles all the time as a
Mhm.
mother, a wife, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working full time. There's always so many roles and positions in your life and in other people's lives that you play, and just kind of being that foundation there for
Mhm.
people and being able to just so swiftly and gracefully adapt. I think that for me is what womanhood is.
I think that's a great definition. I love that adaptability,
Mhm.
which I think is like at the core of what you're doing with your work as a trainer too, and like in your life, your own life of like moving from three different completely disparate places and adapting and creating your business as an entrepreneur. So, what an awesome definition.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm. And what is some advice that you would give to a woman that you met on the street? It could be about like really anything. That they'd probably run away if you did it in New York, but
Yeah, I know. My advice would be to go ahead, take action, and make as many mistakes as you possibly can.
hmm.
They say that the rate at which you make decisions is a better predictor of success than the accuracy of your decisions. And I think that not just professionally, but in life in general, like truly nobody really knows what we're doing here. So if there's something that you feel in your heart that you really want to pursue, I say go for it. And the best way to lose control over your life is to care what other people think. And not even that, but think that people care. Because ultimately, I think we're all a little bit more self centered than we would like to admit, for better or for worse, just
Oh,
human nature.
yeah. I think that's very good advice because I'm always like I tripped or something, but like it's not about the people watching or whatever because they're gonna forget in like 2 seconds. But I'm
Oh,
like,
sure.
oh, but
Yeah, I'm the same way. And they say too that winners lose more than losers.
hmm,
They've just been able to pick themselves back up and keep going.
yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I think that's great. Keep losing, keep trying new things, and maybe try training with Leslie. So Leslie, can you give us all the info on how people can get in contact with you if they're in New York?
Yes, of course. So I'm mostly on Instagram. My Instagram handle is vital wellness underscore. And it's spelled just like how it sounds. So that's my social media. I also have my website, which is leslievitalwellness.com. I take clients at Equinox as well as outside clients and virtual clients now as well for any personal training and nutrition coaching.
Oh, great. Okay, so anyone in the country can go to you then.
Exactly. Anybody.
Okay, amazing. Okay, cool. Well, Leslie, is there anything else you want to impart to our listeners before we sign off?
I think we hit everything. But again, thank you, Alice, for having me. This was awesome.